Hello and welcome to this edition of Türkiye Talks. Today I am joined by Kadir Üstün from Washington and also Vişne Korkmaz, Professor Vişne Korkmaz. Welcome to this show.
Thank you, Bora. Thank you, Kadir Hoca.
Today we are going to focus on again the crisis in Ukraine. We have seen a bold move from Putin. Last week he talked about recognizing separatist entities within Ukraine, and some people regard this as the start of a big war. Do you agree with that? Maybe we can start with you, Professor Vişne. What do you think? Can we say that a new war has started in Eastern Europe?
Okay. I am one of the believers of the new Cold War story or rhetoric. So yes, Putin's speech related to recognition of independence for these two separatist regions in Ukraine, I think made this new Cold War visible. What I mean by using this new Cold War conceptualization, I meant strategic competition and rivalry between the great powers, and in case of Europe, if we talk about European security architecture, that means USA and Russia. We should accept that Ukraine crisis is a complex one, multi-layered crisis, and on the one hand, it was the extension of Russian assertive foreign policy in Black Sea and Mediterranean. And the major objective of this assertiveness, even from the beginning, which can be set to 2008, 6 Days War, from those days to today, the major objective of this assertiveness, I think, is related to challenging statu quo and major security structure in Europe. Putin's speech actually made it clear that Russia can use even identity rhetoric or ideational legitimization for this challenge. And in this speech, he almost rejected the existence of Ukraine as an independent sovereign unity entity. So he adopted a very maximalist position apart from his assertiveness, Kremlin's assertiveness going back to Georgian offensive. This is, I think, put a new turn to all these new Cold War idea. Why? Because when Kremlin actually started Crimean offensive and before that Georgian offensive, usually Moscow used this limited base of offensiveness to manage the cost and risks of the operations. Now we can see on the geographical scene, again a limited offensive in a way, because only Donbass area now is in the interest of Russia. Putin actually made a correction after he made a speech. He underlined that Russia recognized, of course, independence of ex-Soviet republics, but Ukraine was an exception. But nevertheless, he made the speech and he signed the treaties with these two separatist entities. He ordered Russian peacekeeping forces, means Russian military actually. So till now, the shape of the offensiveness actually still can be seen in limited sense, but this rhetoric and the broadening perspective of this offensiveness is a little bit broad, I think. But I mean, this offensiveness can be easily broadened, and as we know, the recent developments in Moscow, Russia accepted the use of Russian military abroad of the Russian borders, which is not a surprise, of course, but all these give us a sign that this operation cannot be contained in the border between separatist regions and Ukraine. So if the operation will enlarge, this create different risky scenarios, and in this case, a kind of hot conflict, armed conflict, in form of annihilation war, or in form of full invasion, or partly invasion, or the different scales of hybrid war type of conflict can be expected in Ukraine area, in Ukraine scale. On the other hand, this crisis is related to Russian position with the West, as I mentioned at the beginning of answer of this question. Russia wanted to challenge today's status quo in European security order. Putin made this objective clear by sending, different demand letters to NATO and US. The letters, the answers turn back, and then new answers are written. Actually, are supposed to be written during those days. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, by signing these treaties with Donetsk and Luhansk, and by recognizing their independence, Putin changed the status quo in Ukrainian crisis. He actually, by this, started to create a blow. Yes, create a blow over Minsk Accords. So this, of course, create an impact related to impact on the competition and the challenge and the tension between West and Russia over this conflict.
Yeah. At this point, maybe we should look at what is the reaction, actually. Russia made it clear her motives. As you have said, we know that they want to they want to regain their influence in the Eastern Europe. We know the near abroad policy in those areas. But the reaction from the West, from NATO, from the United States, was not so strong. I mean, in terms of rhetoric, yeah, we have heard really tough statements from NATO Secretary General, from US President, from capitals in Europe. But when it comes to action, we have seen nothing much. Yesterday, when I was listening to NATO Secretary General, you know, the famous motto when people criticize NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, instead they say no action, talk only. You know, Kadir, what do you think about the reaction of the West? Do you think these sanctions can work to stop Russia, or they are going to let this as it is?
Well, if the sanctions were going to stop Russia, it would have done so, and Russia would have not taken these steps. In many ways, both sides are doing what they were expected to do. The U.S. has announced already that they would only protect NATO countries. They've reinforced NATO borders. They've sent soldiers. Various, they've increased American presence in the Baltic, in Poland, and other places. But they have said from the beginning that they wouldn't get into a war with Russia, and they wouldn't protect Ukraine other than providing military support and all sorts of support to Ukraine. So there's nothing unexpected here. On the part of Putin, there's not much that is unexpected either. We knew he was going to move in, and the only question was whether he would move in and take a small chunk and buy this time and then do this again in the future, or he goes for a full-scale invasion. Right now, Americans are saying a full-scale invasion is quite likely, but Putin may not rush to that. He might first focus on these, pro-Russian district, the administrative sort of units he declared as independent countries. So he's gonna, try to take over there. The impact of the sanctions is more on the punishment side, I would say, not deterrence, because these sanctions are not going to deter Putin, and he has enough sort of money stacked away, and he kind of sanction-proofed his economy to a large extent. Of course, it doesn't mean that's cost-free. It's a lot of cost for Russian, businessmen, Russian oligarchs, Russian economy, and U.S. still has more in the pipeline. If they wanted to impose those sanctions, they could really have a major impact on the Russian economy. But Putin seems unfazed about that. And of course, the announcement of the the German announcement about the Nord Stream 2 was also important. And then I think the West uniting around these sanctions is significant, and Japan and Australia, others joined in this camp. So in that sense, maybe there's going to be an economic Cold War rather than a military Cold War in the years ahead, because I don't see Putin stopping right now. I think he's going to need to declare some sort of victory, but will he go for a full-scale invasion to sort of basically take over Ukraine for good, or engineer some sort of coup in Kiev? Those are the calculations, but certainly sanctions have not deterred Putin, and I don't think they will stop the military. So there's a problem with the American approach. Obviously, while they've created unity among NATO, their threats have been economic threats. Putin is moving his military, and he's trying to revise these borders. The punishment for that seems to be economic so far, and that's been part of the Turkish criticism. President Erdogan talked about NATO needing to decide what to do. Exactly at the same time, Erdogan also trying to find some sort of resolution, but in a time where the West and Russia are heading towards cutting their sort of diplomatic relations, and that's going to be hard. That's going to be much harder to do. But yeah, sorry, I don't want to keep this long, but sanctions are not going to be effective to prevent an invasion, but they will they will exact a lot of costs on Russia.
I want to a little bit talk a little bit more about the reaction of the United States in. I mean, when we look at history, the United States was the last and very late to join two big wars. If you remember, in 1914 was the start of the World War I, but the United States joined very late at a very late stage. Also, World War II, the United States watched Nazi Germany, occupying France, occupying Poland. They waited until the Pearl Harbor attack in 1941. When I watch what's happening in Ukraine, this incident reminds me these two late involvement of the U.S. Do you think we are going to see a similar attitude? I mean, United States using very harsh rhetoric against Putin, Russia, and you have both said, economic sanctions will not stop Putin. Do you have similar feeling? As long as U.S. doesn't have a big trauma or a direct attack, they don't feel to be, involving this crisis. Do you agree with that? What is your take on this, Vişne Hocam?
Okay. Yes, of course, such kind of resemblance can be taught, but I mean, since NATO is one of the key institution of European security, and since US has the leading role in NATO, despite of NATO's all membership character, maybe we can think differently, though I like to use your example here. Why Pearl Harbor was so important for USA, because it was, I mean, this kind of attack and rising Japan as a naval power in Pacific created a big blow on the U.S. priority at the Pacific. Today, U.S. has also the objective of turning or pivoting to Asia. All we know, I mean, books, news, and journal articles are continuing to be written on this subject. To concentrate on balance in Pacific, to constrain China without provoking her, needs not the retreat maybe, but recalibration U.S. presence in other regions. I mean, U.S., I think, during even Trump's era and at the beginning of Biden's era, tried to do this. But this quick escalation in Ukraine crisis actually prevented U.S. from turning its back to Europe towards Pacific. This was a kind of trick for the USA. Last week's, I don't remember the writer's daughter's name, but an article written in Foreign Policy, and in this article, the author suggested that US should be ready to for the two-front war or two-front conflict, both in Pacific and in Atlantic or in Europe. This, I mean, making such kind of statement is easy on paper, but having such kind of cost is not very easy. The best possible way for the US is supporting and encouraging her partners to be more and more capable by spending more and more on defense expenditures, and Russian threat came at the right time here. But also Russian threats created a very strategic fear and confusion and chaos in the heart of Europe. So, I mean, balancing these two, I mean, containing Russian fear and preventing, because of this fear, European actors can find divergent ways, preventing these divergences, and also motivating and supporting partners to spend more and more on defense expenditures is needed a very delicate balance. And US, I think, wants to reach this delicate, or wants to guarantee this delicate balance. Why I dedicate this solution, this conclusion, why I came to this conclusion. I watched Biden's speech related to sanctions. He actually ignored the possibility of giving reply to Putin's claims. Also, I read the newly released U.S. strategy on Indo-Pacific, and again in the document, U.S. Adapted not soft approach, but adapted very non-provocative approach to Asian security orders, status quo, etc. So this implies me that U.S. Doesn't want to provocate two peer rivals of her, Russia and China, while she is trying to reach this delicate balance. I mean, making the partners more capable militarily also, and motivate them to spend and to think about their own self-defense. But with coordinating with US, of course, not just thinking about autonomy, is not just in the wishful list of, or wishing list of US, but with coordination with US, Washington DC, I think, wants to keep her allies, partners, capable enough to deter her rivals on the different scenes of this geopolitical competition, now Europe and Pacific, actually.
Kadir, what about European attitude? What does this crisis tell us about European strategy? Let's say their relationship with Russia. Do you think Europeans can stand against Russia on their own? How do you analyze the situation in Europe?
Well, it's clearly not possible for the EU to stand on its feet, especially when it comes to security. It's the international system, the European security is largely dependent on the US. That's been the case for a long time now. And with this crisis, we've seen it hasn't changed. And now the US leading the sort of Western camp is unwilling to do certain things in the international affairs. So on the one hand, the US declares that it's prepared to protect NATO countries, but it's not willing to sort of put its kind of like pay a lot of cost for preserving the international system. Remember when Iraq invaded Kuwait, that was the main argument. We cannot allow countries to invade one another, and we need to enforce the international system's rules. And who is going to do that? That's the United Nations Security Council. So right now, of course, Russia is a UN Security Council member. That's not going to happen. Any kind of resolution will not pass through the Security Council. So what is the U.S. left with? The U.S. can build a coalition against Russia and then sort of punish Russia for trying to change the rules of the game in the international system. The U.S. is unwilling to do that, partly because also there is no major push from the Europeans about that, right? Europeans have been trying to negotiate with Putin. Germany has been hesitant to cancel the Nord Stream, which it did now, but it is not enough to prevent Putin from moving into Ukraine. We have to remember there is already an invasion. Crimea is under Russian control since 2014. This is simply the enlargement of that invasion, and the Europeans have not been arguing that we have to make sure there is no further invasion and we must stop Putin. When there's not such a push, and then the U.S. is already unwilling to do much militarily because of the history here, right? Iraq, Afghanistan, Iraq. So they don't want a hot conflict with Russia. Your earlier question, could they still be pulled into something like that with Russia? It is possible. I mean, we don't know where Russia wants to really stop. If they take Ukraine, are they going to stop? Because they've done this in Georgia before. They have intervened in Syria. They would argue that Assad government invited them. They were simply honoring their agreement with Syria. But Russia has been quite willing to try to revise the borders along its its Soviet Union's formerly Soviet Union's borders. So the international community, quote unquote, which is largely the Europeans and the Americans, have been unwilling to enforce the rules of the game in the international system. They've been very vocal and strong about protecting NATO, protecting Western security, but not as a global argument against Putin. So it remains problematic because of that. In many ways, Putin is coming to the fight with arms and tanks and everything, and you're going to the fight with like economic sanctions only. So where that balance is not going to balance, right? So I do expect Putin to go further than this. I do expect some sort of hot conflict. I don't know where it would end, whether along the way Putin will stop and pull away. But I hope it doesn't, because this concerns Black Sea security as much as the international system. It impacts Turkey, it impacts the region, European security, etc. Bora, maybe you want to talk about the current situation inside Turkey. President Erdogan made some statements on Wednesday talking about he actually cut his trip to Africa kind of short because of the developments in Ukraine, and he also spoke to Putin on Wednesday. So what is the feeling out there right now?
Turkey is very concerned about the rising tension in the region. It's not only the government, but the public also. When you watch televisions all night long, all TV channels, all news channels people are discussing the situation in Ukraine, because Turkey, had witnessed two big wars near its borders in Iraq for the last 20 years. Also Syria. So we can also talk about the problem in Georgia, the fighting in Georgia in 2008. So when there is a war or an armed conflict in and around your borders, it affects all your security. You come under refugee pressure, economic problems. It's a big issue. So this is also another one. I used to do a TV show in a Turkish national TV with Vişne Hoca. We made several programs on the situation in Black Sea, if you remember. So I think Turkey is closely watching what's going on, and the Turkish President Erdogan made a very clear statement about Turkey's stand. Turkey doesn't recognize Russia's moves to, menace actually the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Turkey also opposes the annexation of Crimea in 2014. So Turkish position is very clear. Turkey doesn't support Russian expansion, Russian moves in Ukraine, but at the same time, Turkey and Russia are very close in certain cases. We have a defense agreement on air defense systems, S-400s. Also, Russians are building a nuclear plant in Turkey. But at the same time, Turkey and Russia are in competition in Libya, in Syria, in Karabakh, in Caucasus. So there should be a fine line for Turkish foreign policy, which is very difficult to pursue. On the one hand, you are a NATO member, but at the same time, you have problems with your allies, with the US and other countries. So it's a very difficult task for Turkey to balance its foreign policy. But still, Turkey can talk to Russians and Ukrainians at the same time. President Erdogan offered that Turkey, can play a role in decreasing the tension. I think this is going to continue, and this also, from my point of view, reminds European countries, especially NATO members, the importance of Turkey in this region. I don't know, Vişne Hocam, maybe you want to talk about Turkish position in this crisis too.
Yes, I agree with you. You picturized very well what is Turkey's stand in this issue. Turkey also has important investments in Ukraine, so she doesn't want to see a kind of annihilation war in Ukraine. I mean, this created also negative impacts over Black Sea stability. But also there is a little chance here. Still, apart of shellings, there is no a big clash between Ukrainian and separatist forces / Russian peacekeeping or military advisors or whatever we call them, or whatever international community call them. There is not a very big hot conflict, armed situation on the border between Ukraine and the separatist parties' borders. So if Turkey can, Turkey actually today President Erdogan called both sides to dialogue table. So there is also still I think we have chance to, let's say, frozen the conflict now at this level without actual conflict. So the parties can find a chance to have revised the dialogue table. Also, as you mentioned, Turkey's importance in this new geopolitics started to be recognized again by Western parties because, as I mentioned before, US actually needs to bring together her capable old partners in whether under NATO or some kind of under Western stance. So this also paves the way for the new normalization between Turkey and USA, between Washington and Ankara. So there are many risks, of course. And Mr. Erdogan today underlined that Turkey wants to continue her balanced approach. He clearly stated that Turkey cannot ignore Russia and cannot ignore Ukraine. And apart from this clear stance, also in terms of Western-Russian tension, because Turkey is a NATO member, Turkish straits is very important. They are very important in Black Sea balance of power. Turkey is hosting NATO radar system, as we know, in Kürecik. So all these underlines again Turkey's strategic geopolitical importance in the eyes of her Western partners. In Cold War, whether it is starting or reach a new turning, we don't know yet. But this new Cold War and this tension, I think, cannot be stopped at one night. Of course, some freezing moments can be reached, and this can be used for de-escalation. We will see what will happen actually, but as you mentioned, Turkey's position is very clear in both normative sense and in realpolitik sense, because Turkey doesn't want to see any kind of destabilization in Black Sea. She has no interest in it, but it is not dependent on, unfortunately, just Turkey's Ukrainian relations. This crisis is more than Ukrainian-Russian crisis, I think Western-Russian crisis, and it is why the initiative of how these things going on is belonging to Russia, and we will see how Putin will interpret the situation here.
Yeah. Thank you, Vişne Hocam. Before we close, Kadir, we have a few minutes. Do you want to add something to Turkey's position before we go?
Well, Turkey is, as I actually mentioned it earlier, we discussed it with you as well in other shows, is one of the countries that will be most affected by this, because Turkey has a large trade volume with both countries, and we are going towards the summer. There's a lot of tourists from both of these countries coming to Turkey. But of course, you know, the revision of the international system, the roles of the international system is happening right before our eyes. This is not a new phenomenon. Putin kind of wants to rebuild the strength of Russia as he sees it. And these former Soviet regions, as he sees it, are not, you know, they don't have a claim to independence, and they were former regions. And I think he will do everything he can to eventually, you know, integrate them into Russia somehow. And the West's policy has been so far unified, but that unification is happening on the economic front. So there could be Russia's economic isolation, which would have a negative impact on Turkey. And if there's invasion of Ukraine, the Turkish relations, economic relations with Ukraine will also be impacted. I have some friends from Turkey, some businessmen, they're like asking, is war gonna happen? You know, because they have businesses out there, a lot of Turkish people. So that's going to have an impact on Turkey, and we all hope that tensions get lowered and some sort of diplomatic solution can happen. But I doubt that will happen anytime soon, especially without Putin feeling like he can declare victory.
Yeah, with this, thank you, Kadir Üstün and Professor Vişne Korkmaz. With this, we come to the end of this Türkiye talks. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again.
Thank you, Bora. Thank you, Vişne.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for to both.
Bye.
Bye bye.